Welcome
to the Age of Awakening.
Please identify yourself. Enter.
Hey, what's up, Triple P Nation? You guys had an incredible week. I love all the comments I received from last week's episode on the crisis in the American healthcare paradigm, which I call the American sick care paradigm. Loved all the feedback. You guys were really jacked up about the recommendations, how we kind of did a general overview. Some of you were blown away by the statistics, couldn't believe just how bad it was. And so this week is all about really drilling down further. I want you to understand specifically what metabolic syndrome is, how it's affecting and wreaking havoc on your cellular health and well-being. But more importantly, how dangerous is it? What are the contributing factors? And then how we're going to reverse it. But I also want to give you some context to this because this has been occurring over quite a period of time. This just didn't happen. And for those, and I know it's no one here listening, some are like, it's not the food. Oh, it can't be the food. The food's fine. By the way, did you see the New York Times did an article recently that seed oils are actually not all that bad. In some cases, they're really good for you. Yeah, that was bought and paid for by Kraft Food, right? So, you've got to be really diligent about where you're getting your sources from and who you're listening to. Big ag, big pharma, big food, big government. There's an agenda. Why the agenda is to keep us sick. Why the agenda is to keep us stuck in this chronic cycle of illness and disease. I don't know. I can't figure it out because it makes more sense financially as a country to get us healthy, to get us well. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to mitigate life expectancy. I really don't know. I'm just all spitballing here because none of it makes sense to me. And for smart thinking people like you, I know it doesn't make sense for you as well. Listen, at our current rate, if we keep spending as much money as we are, again, $4.5 trillion just last year on sick care in this country, it's going to bankrupt our society because people are not getting healthier as they get older. They're getting sicker. And as you get older and you get sicker, you consume more of this sick care model. And we don't have the funds for it. Medicare is going broke. It's a spiral into the toilet, and we've got to change it. And the only way we change it is through grassroots efforts. It's through shows like this. It's the work that Callie and Casey Means are doing. If you haven't read Casey's book, Good Energy, Dr. Casey Means from Stanford, read it. They are going to be a part of RFKJ's Health and Human Services team on looking at all these issues and offering practical solutions to getting to the root causes, to help reverse the chronic disease that's going on with our kids is over the top. 1 in 4 of our teens, 12 to 18, are obese. 35% of them are pre-diabetic. We can't have that. That never occurred. So this week we want to get into what is the metabolic syndrome, and then I'm going to give it into the context. So let's talk about it. So metabolic syndrome, really it's a cluster of conditions that increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. And it's really characterized by a combination of 5 key risk factors. And a person is diagnosed with metabolic syndrome if they have 3 or more of these factors. Number 1 is abdominal obesity. So that's excessive fat around your waist. So the classification for males, it's a waistline of greater than 40, and females is a waistline greater than 35. Remember, 3 or more, you're considered metabolically insufficient or metabolically ill. Number 2 is high blood pressure. And the baseline is greater than 130 over 85, or if you're using blood pressure medications already. Number 3, high blood sugar, which is also known as insulin resistance or pre-diabetic. And the marker here, the blood marker, is a fasting glucose of greater than 100 milligrams per deciliter, or if you're already taking diabetic medication. The fourth is high triglycerides. That's greater than 150 milligrams per deciliter. So if your triglycerides are greater than 150, or if you're taking medication, statin drugs, for elevated triglyceride levels. And then the fifth one is low HDL cholesterol, what is called a quote unquote good. There's really no good or bad. They just do different things, right? If your numbers are less than 40 for men and less than 50 in female, or if you're taking medication for low HDLs, that would be another positive marker. So obesity, abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, and low HDL levels. If you have 3 or more, you're considered metabolically insufficient. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, don't feel horrible about yourself. This is not to shame anybody. This is not anything other is to let's figure this out. Let's get informed so we can then know what steps we need to take to change it. So right now, it's estimated that 8 out of 10 adults are metabolically insufficient, right? Or they're experiencing metabolic syndrome. It's crazy. 80%? That's absolutely nuts. So why is metabolic syndrome so dangerous? There's some basic factors, guys. Number one, heart disease increases by threefold. It raises your likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes fivefold. Metabolic syndrome is strongly linked to obesity, insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and hormonal imbalances. Some of these things we touched on last week, but we're going to do the deeper dive today. We also discussed what some of the contributing factors are. We talked about a bad diet, highly processed food diet, refined sugars, seed oils, all those things. Lack of physical activity, sedentary lifestyles, chronic stress, poor sleep, hormonal imbalances, and toxins in our environments and endocrine disruptors. So how are we going to reverse that? We're going to get into. But I want to start with some context here. Because we know we're facing a major epidemic of obesity and overweight in our country right now. It's classified as a significant global concern, but really, the United States is at the epicenter. Currently, 30.7% of United States adults are classified as overweight. But wait, it gets worse. This specifically is defined by body mass index, which is between 25 and 29.9 is overweight, pardon me. Now, the bad news is that 42.4% of adults fall into the obesity category with a BMI of 30 or higher. So you put those two numbers together, 74.1% of adults are either overweight or obese. Does that qualify as a crisis? Yeah, I think so. So 7 out of 10 are categorized as either overweight or obese. So doesn't this highlight the urgent need for comprehensive assessment and health initiatives to change this process? I would think so. If we love our fellow humankind, I would think so. But guys, did you know that our ancestors actually ate more calories than we do today? And they stayed lean. Wait, what? Let me explain. Yeah, we're fatter than our ancestors, despite eating similar calories. While obesity is a complex topic that requires really a very nuanced conversation, I believe that one of the reasons for the rise of obesity rates is the result of downregulation of our metabolic rates due to the dietary environmental factors. What does downregulate mean? Basically suppresses. So I'm going to discuss this in more depth. But one of the biggest changes between now and then is the types of fat that we're consuming in our diet, which really is changing the type of fat that's in our body. And this dietary switch, what we really is like swapping butter and tallow and ghee for processed fats, margarine and oils, is really the cause of the downregulation of our metabolism. We are also exposed to significantly higher levels of environmental toxins. I mentioned last week, just touched on the glycophosphate in microplastics, right? The herbicides, pesticides, and the microplastics that are in our environment that's being used on our food sources, which also further downregulate the energy production by interfering with metabolic pathways and signaling from cell to cell. The standard American diet, right, which is rich in PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the environmental toxins disrupt our ability to convert food into energy, which leads to an increased tendency to store food. Get this, to store food as fat instead. It's not being burnt off, it's being stored. So there's the whole energy balance issue. Energy balance refers to the relationship between the energy consumed through our food and beverages, right? Calories in, and the energy expended through bodily functions, such as physical activities, calories out. And there are four main components of calories out, which I'm going to outline for you. The largest component of calories out is your basal metabolic rate. Again, I touched a little bit last week, but we're going to dig into it some more. It's the amount we burn calories at rest throughout the day. And this accounts for roughly 70% of your metabolism. And it plays a central role in energy balance as it determines how the body processes and utilizes energy from its food. And it can strongly influence your calories out, right? Calories burned. It refers to all the chemical processes that occur in our body to maintain life, including converting food into energy and building and repairing tissues and removing waste products. Yet, fat again is the result of just too many calories in relative to the calories coming out, right? That math still exists. But what if there was a major change in our metabolism that impacts the calories outside of the equation? You see, the better and more efficient your metabolism is, the more calories you burn, particularly at rest. And this is something you can improve with your lifestyle and dietary changes. So let me get into a little bit of the research here. Really what inspired today's podcast is the work done by Dr. John Speakman, a leading researcher in the field of metabolism. Dr. Speakman and his lab found that there has been a reduction in metabolic rates and that our activity expenditure, basically our intentional exercise, has increased, which was really contradictory to some of the messaging we get from mainstream media. And actually, I thought so as well, too. I thought we were far more sedentary than we were, let's say, 50 or 100 years ago. But he's saying the research is not showing that, right? Now, a reduction in our BMR means that our metabolisms aren't burning as many calories at rest. Speakman said that the magnitude of this effect is sufficient to explain the obesity pandemic. So while many of us may consume too many calories for their needs, right, and this can lead to weight gain, a huge red flag is the basal metabolic rate of our nation is declining. So our ability to burn calories is diminishing. So this statement is supported by a steady downtrend in our body temperature. Get this, right? As metabolic rate can be assessed through body temperature. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, calories are a unit of energy. And energy is expended, right, through burning. So the more calories you burn, the higher your core temperature is going to be. Within reason, right? There's a governor on it so it doesn't elevate too high. So how much did our ancestors eat? Well, according to Speakman, in the past, eating more food was often celebrated, and unlike today's modern mindset around eating less and calorie restriction. So our great-grandparents, for instance, would consume more calories than we do today while still maintaining a really healthy weight. A striking example of that comes from the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, MSC, which was conducted in the 1940s. Bear with me, it's relevant, right? The participants were lean men aged 20 to 33 with an average height of 5'10" and an average weight of 152. And despite their lean physiques, their maintenance calorie requirement was a staggering, get this, guys, 3,500 calories per day. I talked about the average basal metabolic rate for males and females on the last show. And I said for males, typically is between 18 and 2,200 calories a day, your BMR. They're saying here back in the 40s, it was 3,500 calories a day. That's staggering. So for context, the average caloric intake in American today is approximately, get this, 3,500 to 3,600 calories a day. Yet obesity rates at an all-time high. You see, the Minnesota starvation experiment was a meticulously controlled study ensuring every detail was closely monitored. Participants' activity levels were tracked, and professional chefs prepared all their meals with precise weighted proportions to maintain strict control of their caloric intake. They weren't doing a ton of exercise, but remain active with daily steps. They average about 10 to 15,000 steps per day and performed one cardio session per week, which is basically a 30-minute walk. We're not talking about, doing an F45 hit workout here. And they were only moving at 4.5 miles per hour with a 10% incline on a treadmill. And in addition, they engaged in 25 hours of university classes, schoolwork, 15 hours of just home stuff, taking care of the house, that kind of thing. So before the semi-starvation phase, the study began with a 4-week control period during which the participants ate at their maintenance calorie level, the amount of calories necessary they would consume without gaining weight. And to establish this baseline, they found that the controlled diet provided 3,492 calories a day, including 112 grams of protein, 124 grams of fat, 482 grams of carbohydrates. So guys, I did my own research. I asked ChatGPT. I asked how much, men in today's world should eat at this size. How many calories, right? 5'10", 152, which used a modern calorie calculator. And here's what the result was. And they said to maintain weight of 152 pounds, right? 152.7 to be specific. A 30-year-old man walking 10,000 to 15,000 steps daily should consume approximately 2,065 calories to 2,415 per day. A full 1,000 calories less per day than they did in 1940. See, the Minnesota starvation experiment is not the only example. There are countless other examples and studies documenting how much more food our ancestors ate. So, for example, from Eating for Strength, published in 1888, yeah, I know, who read that one? The subsistence diet was 1,714 calories, and many people are eating this amount today. The sustenance diet typically prioritizes meeting the minimum caloric needs for survival. Now, while it can sustain life, it's unlikely to support the full potential of human health, energy, and vitality. It's just keeping us alive. It's not allowing us to thrive or experiencing optimal health and well-being. But here's the deal. Did they really move more? Now, yes, for some people, activity levels have declined, no question, and they do need to get more active. However, as Speakman says in his research paper pointed out, this isn't enough to explain the epidemic of fat gain. He concluded that increasing obesity in the United States and Europe has probably not been fueled by reduced physical activity. He said they've identified here a decline in adjusted basal metabolic rate as previously unrecognized factor. So in the United States today, the average steps per day are between 5,117 and 6,540, definitely which is too low. It should be closer to 8 to 12,000 steps per day. But again, this isn't enough to explain the epidemic of obesity. See, walking is definitely vital for health, no question, but there is only a 131 calorie difference between walking 5,000 steps per day and 12,000 steps today. 131 difference. So much. So we should be walking 30,000 steps per day to increase our calorie burn, right? Not so much. We should be trying to improve our BMR. Staying active is essential, but more isn't always better. And here's why. Guys, your body has only a finite amount of resources, and how quickly they're depleted depends on the demands you place on it. So this is often referred to as your drain bucket. So pushing too hard can lead to overtraining, which may disrupt thyroid function, downregulate your thyroid, hinder energy production, while creating a cycle of diminishing returns, also increasing your risk of injury. The present investigation demonstrates that thyroid function is strongly affected by prolonged physical activity, and negative energy balance. It basically means there's benefits to exercises, but only up to a certain point. Past this point, exercise really can be harmful to the body. So humans are, well, humans, and we have a limited capacity for what we can give towards energy expenditure. So there has to be a fine balance. So how did our metabolism get downregulated? Well, one of the biggest changes our nation has seen is a change in the type of dietary fats we consume. More to it, PUFs, polyunsaturated fats, like vegetable oil, seed oils, nuts, less fats, high in saturated fats, like animal fats, cocoa butter, coconut oil, butter. Humans have never historically consumed this level of PUFAs. Historic levels of linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 PUFA, for example, ranged between 1% and 2% of daily caloric intake pre-1930. Today, the average is estimated to be between 10 to 25 of total daily caloric intake. And as a result, our body fat is becoming more and more unsaturated. PFA's availability has increased 238% since 1909. The type of fatty acids you consume, which impacts the type of fat inside you, is playing a significant role in the calories outside of the equation. The fat we consume not only serves as an energy source, but it also has a structural and signaling role. A body filled with more PUFAs will send different metabolic signals relative to more saturated fat stores. Think of hibernation signals. What do squirrels load up before they hibernate for the winter? That's right, nuts, unsaturated fats. We've become more unsaturated, and our metabolisms are being downregulated as a result. There are two consequences of this metabolism downregulation. One, obesity rates are on the rise as a result of abundant food access and downregulation of metabolism. And the other side, in high pursuit of being lean, many people keep caloric intake too low and are afraid to eat. What? Check this out. You see, when we do this, something eventually has to give, leading to a loss of systemic function. Whatever your body's weakest link may be, this could manifest as digestive issues, hair thinning, histamine intolerance, oxalate sensitivity, and other health challenges. Research has consistently shown that prolonged caloric restriction reduces metabolic rate as the body adapts to conserve energy. It's the fad yo-yo diet, up and down. And most of these diets are massive calorie restriction. It's why people who go on these massive calorie restriction diet always gain it back and gain back even more so. They've effed up their metabolic rate, their metabolic condition. And really, guys, I empathize with this because I struggled with this growing up as a kid. I was chubby as a teenager, especially my early teenage years. I was really self-conscious about it. This was at the genesis of the diet cultural craze that was going on back in the early 80s. I faced fat shaming, that before even fat shaming was a thing. I became overly consumed by food, which actually stressed me out and caused me to eat more crap. I never did the diet thing, but it was all around me, and there was pressure to eat less rather than make better choices. And here's the truth. Chronic caloric restriction is one of the worst things you can do for your health. So today, I've got a much better and healthier relationship with food, and I see that in my appetite. So my appetite is strong. It means that I have a thriving metabolism. So eating enough food is not just okay, it's essential for vitality and well-being. And I'm not saying you should jump in right away and eat a ton of calories. You just can't go all in, as that will lead to rapid weight gain. And when you're at that place of having low metabolic rate, that's a disaster. But before someone who has been restricting calories for such a long period of time, your health will improve if you slowly begin to increase caloric intake, and you can improve metabolic signaling through dietary fat choices and eating enough for your needs. Okay, guys, now that I've given you some context to how we got where we're at, right, here's what you need to know. We're not burning less calories, as fact, as it relates to work. We're doing as much work, if not more work, than 70, 80 years ago. our BMR is screwed up. Why? Well, a lot of it has to do with the calorie restrictive mindset that so many people have right now. And two is the PUFAs, right? Polyunsaturated fatty acids. So now we're going to get into the devastating effects of this metabolic insufficiency. So you need to really understand it in a deeper sense. So when we are metabolically insufficient, as seen in metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance or poor mitochondrial function, several cellular dysfunctions occur that disrupt the energy production in your cells, which increases overall inflammation and accelerates your aging. So the first one is what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. This creates an energy crisis at the cellular level. The mitochondria, guys, are responsible for converting the sugar that breaks down from the food you eat, right? From the simple carbs and the complex carbs, and fatty acids into ATP, which is energy. When metabolism is inefficient, mitochondria becomes dysfunctional and produces less ATP for your system, less energy. So instead of efficient oxidative phosphorylation, cells rely on what's called glycolysis, which is an inefficient process that leads to excess lactate and cellular stress. Dysfunctional mitochondria also produce excessive reactive oxygen species, also known as ROS, leading to oxidative stress and cellular damage. I talked about oxidative stress on last week's show. This is the precursor for accelerated aging and chronic disease, oxidative stress. So the second devastating effect is what we call insulin resistance. What is insulin resistance? Well, in healthy metabolism, insulin binds to receptors on your cells, which triggers glucose up into the cell to be used for energy. With insulin resistance become desensitized, reducing glucose's ability to uptake, right? So what happens then? This leads to chronically higher blood sugar levels or hyperglycemia, which damages blood vessels, nerves, and organs. The pancreas then compensates by producing more insulin, hyperinsulinemia, which worsens fat storage. So instead of that sugar being broken down, uptake into the cells, stored as energy, it remains in the system, circulating around. It's got to go somewhere. So what happens is glycerol is formed to uptake that and stored as fat. The third devastating effect of metabolic syndrome, chronic inflammation. Basically, your cells become under attack. See, poor metabolism leads to excessive pro-inflammatory cytokines. How many of you guys are old enough to remember COVID? If you recall, the majority of deaths occurred in people over 70, a vast majority, like overwhelming majority, over the age of people. In fact, the median age of death was 82, but it was 70 and higher was the highest risk, with people of 4 or more comorbidities. Because of the poor metabolism, their bodies produces excessive cytokine, create a cytokine stored that they couldn't recover for, and then probably the entire body shut down, causing death. The other effect with chronic inflammation is visceral fat, right, around your belly, releases the inflammation molecules that disrupt normal metabolism. Also, chronic inflammation impairs insulin signaling and contributes to cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and autoimmunity. Right? Starting to connect the dots here, right? The fourth devastating effect of metabolic syndrome is lipotoxicity. You see, in a healthy state, excessive calories are stored in fat cells at adipocytes. In metabolic dysfunction, fat spills over into your organs and muscle tissue, which is known as ectopic fat storage. Fat accumulation in the liver, also known as fatty liver disease, which, by the way, is rapidly rising in children, never found. It used to be an alcoholic's disease. It's now rampant amongst kids. Okay, so fatty liver disease and your pancreas impairs insulin production. And the last one is intramuscular fat, leads to muscle insulin resistance, reducing energy utilization. The fifth devastating effect is what's known as glycation and cellular aging, right? This is the sugar burn problem, guys. It's when excessive glucose binds to proteins. This is a process called glycation and forming advanced glycation end products, AGES. Now, AGES damages proteins, damages your DNA, and of course, your cell membranes. What are on your cell membranes? Receptors. Why do you need receptors? Receptors signal to absorb glucose and other things into your cell. Because the signaling's off, because your DNA has been damaged, this accelerates the aging process and greatly increases your risk of all mortality and disease. Glycation is a key driver of diabetes complication like nerve damage, kidney disease, and vision loss. So if you know someone with diabetes with these conditions, it's because of glycation, right? It's that glucose binding with proteins. Because the glucose is not being utilized. So it's going to bind with the protein. The sixth devastating effect is what's known as hormonal disruption, right? Talked about this also last week when we were talking about revitalizing health and hormones, why we're seeing such a precipitous decline. It's the metabolic endocrine connection. As testosterone declines with insulin resistance and obesity. So 73 or 74.1% of the population right now is considered overweight or obese. There's no surprise why testosterone levels have dropped through the floor. There's also leptin resistance. What is leptin? Leptin makes the brain think our body is starving, hungry. Ghrelin is the hormone that makes you feel full. So this leads to an increase in hunger craving. So you always feel like you're hungry, right? Do you ever have a meal, hour and a half later, like you're famished, like you haven't eaten in a year? This is because of leptin resistance. The other hormonal disruption is cortisol remains chronically elevated. That's the stress hormone. And that's what causes fat to increase in your abdomen area, worsening your insulin resistance. And the last part of hormonal disruption is thyroid function. Your thyroid slows down. When we do comprehensive assessments of revitalizing health and hormones, if there is a precipitous drop in hormone levels, oftentimes there is a dysfunction with their thyroid. Their thyroid is not functioning properly. They go hand in hand. Now, the seventh one is what we call autophagy suppression. So, again, touched on this a little bit last week, but let's get deeper into this. What is autophagy? It's the process by which your cells are removed, right? Damaged cells in particular, the components, and they are recycled materials. So basically, I always think of Miss Pac-Man going around eating the little buttons. That's what it is. Autophagy is going around and eat all the cellular debris. Also, insulin resistance and poor metabolic health suppresses autophagy, leading to cellular junk and accumulation. One of the solutions we talked about last week was time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, which absolutely turbocharges autophagy by causing you to become more efficient at burning fat. Also, and finally here, this contributes to a rapid aging factor. Again, neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all that nasty stuff. And it feeds cancer. Do you know your body produces cancer cells each and every day? Every day you're alive? Really? How come I don't have cancer? Because your immune system. When your immune system can adapt and function and respond as it's intended to do, your body takes care of it. When all these issues are arising that we're talking about, metabolic dysfunction, autophagy, hormonal disruption, the adaptive ability of the immune system becomes suppressed. With immune suppression, there is a greater risk of that cancer turning into a tumor, those cancer cells turning into tumors. So here's the key takeaways from what I just reviewed. Metabolic insufficiency at the cellular level leads to one, less energy production. You're going to feel tired. You're going to feel fatigued. You're going to feel weak. You're going to have less brain function, and you're going to have more brain fog. Two, you're going to increase fat storage, and you'll experience more inflammation. This is going to lead to a higher risk of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Three, your DNA, your genetic material will become damaged. This will age accelerate. I just want to touch a quick moment on this. Many people feel that our future health is predetermined based on our genes. Nothing can be further from the truth. The AMA came out with a study recently that said that 97.8% of all disease is lifestyle related. That includes cancer and heart disease. You're not a victim of your genes. Your genes are signaled based on lifestyle choices, nutrition, diet, rest, all the things we talk about to turn your genes on to express health or sickness. If there is cancer or heart disease in your family and there's a genetic predisposition, your lifestyle choices are determinant of turning that gene on or keeping it turned off. Guys, that's great news. It means you are in control. You don't have to be a victim of your genes because that's a lie. It's a myth. Now, are there some genetic cancers? Yes, of course. Vast majority we see very little of. And then the last one, number 4, is hormonal imbalances. Significant decline in testosterone, massive thyroid suppression, and a lot of leptin resistance. So here's what we need to do. We got to improve mitochondrial function. We've got to become better at insulin sensitivity. We got to reduce inflammation. We got to address our nutrition, our exercise, our sleep, our recovery, so we can reverse this process and restore metabolic health. That's what it comes down to. All right, so I'm going to touch on each one of these. So I gave you the 7 devastating effects, and I'm going to give you solutions for each. By the way, if you're experiencing metabolic syndrome, you have all of these, right? They just don't pick 1 or 2. So here's the solution for mitochondrial dysfunction. Number 1, time-restricted eating and fasting. You want to stimulate your mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria. Cold therapy, saunas, of course, exercise. Exercising in zone 2. Again, that's moving, still being able to breathe and talk, having normal conversation, not being out of breath. And then including HIIT workouts, high interval intense workouts into your exercise. And you want to exercise minimum 3, 5 days a week is ideal, with resistance training, which is step number 2. Okay, we want to make sure to deal with insulin resistance. We want to mitigate your carbs. That doesn't mean eliminate them, but eliminate your simple, highly processed box, bag, or canned carb. We want to implement complex carbs. That's fruits and vegetables, right? This will reduce insulin demand and improve glucose uptake. Strength training, guys, whatever you can do. Bodyweight exercises, band exercises, hit the weights. Build this into your regular weekly routine. Here's an herb that's really effective. It's called berberine. It helps regulate blood sugar levels without excessive insulin spikes. So consider adding that. But of course, let me say this with a caveat. Anything that I'm recommending here, or anything that I'm talking about here, you need to check with a healthcare provider, to make sure it's right for you. Make sure you know what the benefits, the risks are, if it works, if you're on any medication, if there's any complicating factors with it. So this is for educational purposes only, to enlighten you, to give you the information, then to take this information, seek the right healthcare provider, and do your own deep dive, and then to understand what the best course of action. The general ones, exercise, diet, rest, come on, right? We know what that is. But any nutrient recommendations I'm talking about here, you do need to check with your healthcare provider. And I would recommend a natural healthcare provider. As I talked about last week, right? Most medical doctors are given 0 training in nutrition, and the ones that do, it's less than 20 hours. All right, so how do you deal with chronic inflammation? Anti-inflammatory diet. Eliminate seed oils, processed foods, and excessive sugar. Do your sauna, do your cold plunges, do your breath work. What about lipotoxicity? How do I improve that? Again, time-restrictive eating, right? Increases fat oxidation and autophagy. L-carnitine supplementation helps transportation fat into the mitochondria for efficient burning. Zone 2 cardio and fasting. There's a theme here, Jay. All right, how do we mitigate number 5, glycation? Okay, low glycemic diet. Avoid refined carbs and highly processed sugars. Intermittent fasting and alpha lipoic acid. Taurine. These two help reduce glycation and support glucose metabolism. Number 6, how do I mitigate hormonal disruption? High protein, whole food diet, hormone replacement therapy, peptide therapy. Because what's going to happen is it's going to optimize your testosterone and your growth hormone and your thyroid function. So, again, if you missed last week, revitalizinghealthwellness.com, revitalizinghealthwellness.com, that is our clinic. If you want to learn more, go there, go to the contact us, give us your information. We will reach out to you and let's figure out what we can do to help you to regain your health and reverse these devastating effects of the conditions that we all been dealing with. Number 7, okay, how do we mitigate autophagy suppression? Here's that word again, time-restricted intermittent fasting. Resveratrol. Resveratrol can help activate cellular repair pathways. And of course, high-intensity exercise so your body can get into ketosis and burn fat. Now, I'm not saying HIIT exercise will cause ketosis. Intermittent fasting can. And fasting in general, extended fasting, will help you get to ketosis, which is going to help you boost the autophagy without full fasting. All right, so here's my final thoughts on how to restore metabolic health. Fuel your body properly. Prioritize your proteins, healthy, really good fats, saturated fats, and nutrient-dense whole foods. Increasing insulin sensitivity. Use fasting, exercise, carb timing. Healing the mitochondria. Use cold therapy, sauna, fasting, and movement. Optimizing hormones. Support your testosterone and your thyroid and your growth hormone naturally, and lowering inflammation. Remove toxins, seed oils, the pesticides, the herbicides, the highly processed, ultra-processed foods. If you employ this strategy or these strategies, you'll begin to see a reversal of your metabolic health. As you reverse your metabolic health, all of these really critical physiological processes will begin to optimize. Every aspect of your physiological health, cellular health, will begin to restore in what we call homeostasis. The physical effects you'll begin to see: energy, focus, sleep, recovery, alertness. Everything you could possibly imagine will change dramatically. Your quality of life will change dramatically. And I guarantee you, it will put years or quantity to your life. Now, next week, I'm going to be talking about seed oils in particular, what they are, how you can identify them. We're going to be talking about some of the over 10,000 chemicals that the FDA says is generally recognized as safe. That's what they say. Generally recognized as safe. By the way, the same food companies that are making our highly processed food make it for Europe, and they don't put any of this stuff in there. Why is that? We'll address that next week. So listen, guys, I know this has been long. I know we dove into the weeds, but this stuff is really critical to understand it in a more nuanced, but scientific way that you can understand and articulate and regurgitate back, and have conversations that are intelligent and that can be, grounded in pure science. So I appreciate you standing with me today. Again, if you have questions after this episode, email me, Dr. J at Triple P Life, Dr. J at Triple P Life. Go to revitalizinghealthwellness.com, fill out the contact. Let us see if we can help you, find out what's going on, how we can guide you, give you some insight, or find a clinic near you. If we can do that, we'll certainly do that if you're not local here in Western Wisconsin. And then again, right? Great content should flow through us, not to us. 74% are overweight or obese. 7 out of 10 people in your life right now who need to hear this, if it's just beyond you. Again, you could be saving a life. Someone you love, someone you truly care about. Say, hey, you know what? I listened to this guy, Dr. J. He's doing this series on, the devastating effects and the health crisis in the United States, how we got to where we are. I know health is important to you. You might want to take a listen to this. I think this guy is really onto something. Might be able to help you and give you some insight of some of the changes you can make, and maybe make 25 the year you transform your physical and mental well-being, because you cannot be living your triple P life when you're physically and emotionally insufficient and you're just not firing at all, right? You're not firing at a high level. So again, reach out to me. You reach out to me on social media. Listen, if you like the content, hit subscribe, rate, and review, right? You got to hit like. That's the only way more people begin to see and hear this information. So if you haven't done so, give us a rate and review, hit like, and comment below, especially if you're on YouTube. And then be ready for next week's episode on seed oils. And then we're going to continue this process too. I got more content coming for you too, because again, the feedback has been really positive. So we're going to continue to dive into this. So you'll have all the information necessary at your fingertips that you need to be as healthy as you desire to be. So guys, thank you so much for joining me this week. Love and appreciate each and every one of you. As I always say, you be you, just be the best you. And I promise you will always empower your dreams, ignite your passion, and accelerate your health and prosperity. Till next week, be well.